What's up, everybody? Back here today for another video. And today we are going to be ranking every single team in the Big Ten going into 2026. There's 18 teams overall. You got teams like Indiana, who just won the national championship. You have teams like Purdue, who really struggled last season. I'm wearing the Michigan State jersey, the blackout. I love this one. And yeah, I can't wait to talk about every single team in this conference. Now, in 18th place, I'm going to go with the Purdue Boilermakers now. They obviously struggled heavily last year, and they have for a long time now. And it sucks extra, of course, because Indiana is doing so well. Anyway, Purdue, according to the ranking site that I use called Punt and Rally, they're ranked as the 92nd team overall. They are 93rd in defense and 93rd in offense, 96 in defense. They're pretty even on both ends of the ball. Don't have many star players either, pretty much nobody. And their schedule doesn't help them either. They're only projected to win 3 games next season, and potentially that could even be too high. I'm not going to lie. Obviously, there's a lot of good teams in the conference, probably a solid amount of bad teams in the conference, but I think Purdue is pretty far and away the worst team in this conference going into next year. Now, in 17th place is going to be the Northwestern Wildcats, who are ranked 73rd on punt and rally, ranked, pretty kind of mediocre in terms of the entire country. Obviously, Northwestern struggled the last couple of years. It's been kind of a while since they've had a really good year. But Northwestern can go 9-3 any given year. But unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be their year. They're projected to win 5 games, and they have a pretty decent offense. They have Griffin Wild at wide receiver, who's going to be pretty intriguing. But outside of that, not too much going on. Defensively, they'll be all right. They're ranked 77th. They have Michael Kilbane on the D line. That'll be pretty solid. But overall, Northwestern doesn't have too much to offer, and I think they're going to finish 17th in the conference this year. I can't wait to see what their new field looks like then. Now, speaking of Northwestern, 16th is going to be Michigan State, who just lost their quarterback to Northwestern. That's, of course, Aiden Childs. Childs is going to be the starter for Northwestern, I believe, this upcoming season. Michigan State is now stuck with Alessio Milahelovich. I don't know exactly how to say his name, but pretty decent player. He's shown stints of being good so far, but I don't think he's going to have to do too much, and that's because the entire offense, I think, is going to revolve around Cam Edwards at running back. He comes in from UConn. He had like 14 or 1,500 yards last season, something insane. The offense is going to be pretty good for Michigan State. They also have some decent wide receivers coming back. Unfortunately, the defense is not holding up. They also have a really tough schedule. They're only projected to win 4.1 games, which is pretty crazy. But I do think they're going to be a little bit more better than Northwestern. I just think they have a little bit more to offer offensively. And Northwestern's has a better defense, but I do think Michigan State is just a little bit better. In 15th place is going to be Rutgers, another team that struggled over the last couple of years. They're going to be decent. They're ranked 65th overall, which isn't too bad. Their offense, I kind of like. I think they have a couple intriguing pieces in Antoine Raymond and KJ Duff at running back and wide receiver, respectively. Defensively, they look solid. They're ranked number 61 overall, but they don't have too many players that really stand out. The schedule favors them a little bit. They're projected to win 5.5 games. I think I see them on the lower side, probably around 5 or maybe even 4. But regardless, Rutgers is decent. They have a decent offense. They have a decent defense. There's not much to say there. I think they'll probably, do better than, the majority of group of 5 teams. Obviously, be worse than most Big Ten teams. It just kind of falls somewhere in mediocrity in college football as a whole. Next up is going to be Wisconsin, just a very okay team. They're ranked 67th overall. They got obviously Colton Joseph at quarterback in the transfer portal, who I really liked coming out of Old Dominion, who I thought had a fantastic season there. I really like him. I think he's going to be really good. But the reality is, Wisconsin, it's been I mean, not so long, but it's been a decent bit since Wisconsin has been relevant in any sort of case. So I think it's going to be pretty tough to see if they're actually able to fix things. And Colin Joseph, I love him, but I think they're going to need more than that to end up winning things. I also like the running back Abu Sama, who transferred in from Iowa State last year, or over the offseason. But yeah, their schedule doesn't help them out too much. I will say though, it's pretty tough to win in Madison, so that's going to help them out a little bit. But obviously, it's been a long time since they've won. Colin Joseph is great, but I don't think he's going to do everything for them that they need. Next up is going to be Minnesota, who's ranked 38th overall, which is pretty legit. And a lot of that is due to quarterback Drake Lindsay coming back. He did pretty well last season, returns for another year. Love to see it. Good player. I think he's going to help him out a lot. But it's actually going to be their defense that's, going to do the majority of their just, they're going to win games based on their defense, I think. They're ranked 32, which is pretty, high in the grand scheme of things, especially compared to some of the teams we've talked about in the past. Like Michigan State's was all the way down at like 90, I think. So, yeah, Minnesota has a really good defense, and I think that's going to help them out a lot. And Drake Lindsey, of course, I don't think he has too many offensive pieces, but I think he'll do well regardless. And they'll just be a very solid team this year. Not too much to offer, not going to be trash, just kind of in the middle of competitive against some teams, not competitive against others. Next up is going to be the UCLA Bruins, who hired Bob Chesney, who's coming off of a college football playoff appearance with the James Madison Dukes. Now, he took a good amount of his pieces, including Wayne Knight at running back, who's going to be really good for UCLA next season, I believe. He was really important in their run with how good they did in the Sun Belt last season. They're ranked 40th overall, 33 on offense, 51 on defense. I like their offense, especially. Like I mentioned, Knight. They also returned Nico Iamaleava, who did struggle at times last season, but of course is former five-star recruit. Did well at Tennessee. There's a player there. We obviously know that. And I'm not going to say that it's for sure going to work, but I do think that there's certainly a shot. Like I still believe in him. I still think he's a good player. They also have a pretty decent schedule. That helps them out a little bit. They're projected to win 6.3 games, which is the same as Minnesota, to be fair. Um, but yeah, I mean, good team. Love the offense, like I said, and yeah, I think they can be pretty good next season. Next up is going to be the Maryland Terrapins. Now, this one's a little bit bold. Of course, Maryland, it's been a long time since they've been really any good at football. But obviously, last year they had Malik Washington at quarterback, who came in and was their immediate starter. Played, he was unreal for them. They ended up having a decent year, I would say. And he returned for another year. I think a lot of people expect him to go to the portal, but he remains put. I mean, I'm in love with a guy who is able to have a phenomenal season and kind of stay in the same place, which I know is just kind of rare in college football nowadays. Take Cal's quarterback, Jaron Sangapolu-Tele, who did the exact same thing. I really like a guy who can do that. Malik Washington, of course, returning next year. He's going to do so much for this team. They have a decent offense. Obviously, it's surrounded by him. Defense is all right, but I really trust Washington to do well for them, and I think they're very on par with UCLA. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt because I think Washington is just better than Ian Maliava, and I think that I think people are not talking about how bad UCLA was at the start of the year. Of course, they picked it up later on, but UCLA was so bad at the start of the year, and Maryland didn't have those. They had more consistency to them, so I think I'm going to pick Maryland just to be a hair better than UCLA. Now, this next one is going to be pretty controversial, but I'm going to go with Iowa next. Of course, Iowa's, a good program. They're ranked 21 overall, which is a lot higher than some of the teams we've seen in the past. But the reality is, I may sound like a broken record like everybody else says, but without an offense, it's really tough to compete. And Iowa, of course, is, elite on the defensive side of the football. They have their number 14 as a unit on the defensive end this year, 34 in offense, which is, all right. And I like the run game. They have a dual head of Kamari Moulton and LJ Phillips, which is going to be pretty interesting. But on the defensive side of the ball, I don't think they have the star power that they've had in recent years. And I think that's going to affect them a little bit. And offensively, like I mentioned, they have good running backs, but, not a great quarterback, not a great overall unit on the end of the ball. So I think their defense is a little bit overrated, and I think their offense just isn't able to compete in the same way that they need it to. So unfortunately, I just don't think Iowa's going to be as good as some people expect this year. Next up is going to be the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Obviously, a massive program. It's obviously a big deal for them every time football season happens, and they always have a pretty high expectations. They never really live up to it. Obviously, they had Dylan Raiola, but he didn't end up working out. I mean, he's a good player, but he ended up going to Oregon, meaning it's a new era in Lincoln. They went with Anthony Colandrea, who did really well at UNLV. They also have Owen Chambliss at linebacker, who I think is going to be really interesting. And I think they have a pretty decent defensive unit and offensively as well. They're ranked 26 offensively, 30th defensively. I think, a very complete team. If you want one leader on each side of the ball, I think it's a quarterback and a linebacker, and they have that perfectly. Overall, the units are pretty solid. They're pretty deep overall. In Nebraska, obviously with how passionate their fans are, how big of a fan base there is, it's going to be hard to win games in Lincoln, and so I think that's going to help them out a little bit. And I think they're going to be pretty competitive this season. it just kind of sucks that there's so many good teams in the Big Ten that they're just going to have to fall kind of a tier below. We're now in eighth place, which is going to be the Illinois Fighting Illini, a team that's done really well over the last couple of years. They had Luke Altmaier at quarterback, who did a bunch for them, but he obviously is gone. Now they have Caden Hauser coming in, who's a former Michigan State Spartan, actually, but ended up doing phenomenal at East Carolina. Really good at just getting passing yards. Has great stats overall, and led East Carolina to a pretty decent season. Now he comes to Illinois, hopes to continue, the recent success that they've had. And Illinois has never been much of a football program, but recently they've really stepped it up, and I think that's going to continue this year. They just have a very solid team, 29 offensively, 28 defensively. They have a pretty decent schedule. They're projected to win 7.4 games, which is pretty solid. And yeah, I mean, I don't think there's too much to say about Illinois other than they're just pretty consistently good, as of recently, and I think they're going to continue that. I think Hauser is a good enough player to lead them a little bit, and I like their defensive unit as well. Next up is going to be Washington, who returns Damone Williams. Obviously, there's a massive saga about that, how he was going to return, then ended entering the transfer portal, but because he'd already signed to return, there's a whole thing about it. It is kind of messed up, I'm not gonna lie, but regardless, I do think he's a good player. I wouldn't say he's proven a ton. I don't think he's maybe as good as Washington fans were saying in the past, but he's a good player. I think obviously they may not like him, but he is a good guy to have back for sure. And I think he can become a leader based off, obviously he had mistakes and stuff like that, but I think he can come back and become a leader. They're going to need him to be a leader. They have a good defense. Offensively, they're pretty solid as well. Other than Williams, not too much to say about them, honestly. They're projected to win 8 games. They're so good at home that I think that'll help. I think Washington is one of those teams that the conference year alignment actually kind of helps them because they're so good at home. But, on the same time, they're also pretty poor on the road. So I think it kind of goes hand in hand. Washington's a pretty good team. I think they kind of fall out of this top tier of teams. But yeah, I mean, pretty solid football team like they always are. Now I think we're really getting into the top tier of teams in this conference. I think any of these top teams can actually go really, really far. Just kind of depends on what happens. It's going to be Michigan next up. Of course, they were national champion a couple of years ago. Whether it was ethical or not, that's a different discussion. But Michigan did win the national championship. Of course, they're a big time program. They did struggle a couple of years ago, but they picked it up. Obviously, everyone knows, how good Michigan is. They're projected to win 8.2 games this year. I don't think they're going to be as good as, we'll say last year maybe. But very, very solid offense, very solid defense. They're ranked 12th in both cases. They returned Bryce Underwood, who I think is going to be their biggest weak spot, I guess. I'm not super high on Bryce. I think he's done pretty poor recently. And losing out on their running back also I think is going to hurt him a lot. But they did bring Jordan Marshall, so I think that's going to help him out a little bit. They also have Andrew Marsh, who was pretty decent last season. He returns again. And they also have John Henry Daly on the defensive line, who I think is going to be pretty good and lead that pretty solid defensive unit. Kyle Whittingham coming in, new age for Michigan. Obviously, the offseason vibes of Sherrone Moore, obviously things weren't great, but I do think Michigan will be decent. They have a lot of talent, and that helps a lot, but I don't think it's going to be like a elite year for Michigan, just kind of another solid, maybe rank around 15 outside the playoff looking in, decent year, but I don't think Michigan's going to be a top 5 team or anything. There's a lot of people that are really high on USC and Lincoln Riley to get it done this year. They're saying that this is their year. I don't know if I agree with it. I love their offense. Obviously, they return Jaden Mayava. They have King Miller as well at running back, who's going to be really, really interesting for them. I like that offense. I think they have a lot of pieces, good pieces. Riley, whether he's a good coach, I don't really know. The defense is not going to be that good. They kind of struggled last year on the defensive side of the ball. We'll see with USC. I think that they have a lot of potential for sure. Obviously, a lot of talent. They're a big time program, but I don't think their home atmosphere is that good. I don't think it's that tough to play at USC outside of the travel. And they're gonna have some big games this year, so we'll see what's gonna happen. I believe they play Oregon. I think that's at home. But yeah, they're gonna play Oregon. They're gonna play some tough teams. USC, this is a big year for USC, and I think they're gonna be good. I don't think they're gonna be amazing, but I think they'll be pretty good. Next up is going to be a bit of a ballsy pick, but it's going to be Penn State under Matt Campbell, who's going to finish fourth. Now, USC was actually ranked 11th overall. Penn State was as far down as 25, but I really like this Penn State team. They essentially just rinsed Iowa State's entire roster. Rocco Becht, Carson Hansen at running back, Benjamin Brahmer at tight end, a bunch of defensive pieces. Obviously, that's, I just named a couple offensive pieces, but they essentially took everybody. And Penn State, they're ranked 30th offensively. 25th defensively. They're supposed to win 8.5 games, which is pretty solid. I think they can win up to probably nine, but they also could not do very well. Of course, Penn State was obviously really good. They had a really poor season last year, but I think they'll bounce back. I mean, Iowa State went 8-4. They had a lot of injuries that prevented them from being even better, and they basically got that entire roster plus, an extra year of, you know, development. So they're just going to have, I think, a really good roster. I don't think they crack the top three. I think the top three is very set in stone, but I think Penn State, USC, Michigan are just kind of in that next tier of just really, really solid teams. Finally, we are on to the top three, and third place is going to be the Oregon Ducks. They're ranked fifth overall, fifth on offense, fourth on defense. A really solid team. They're supposed to win 10.6 games next year, which is second in the conference, only behind a team that I've yet to name, so stay tuned for that. Of course, they have Dante Moore. They also have Dylan Raiola. I think Moore will probably start. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the biggest Dante Moore fan, but he is a good player. They also have Jordan Davison, who's gonna be pretty good for them as well. Um, yeah, just a really solid team. They always are. Jamari Johnson, that tight end. They have Tatum Tuati at linebacker. So many good pieces. They always have good offensive lines and good defensive lines. Dan Lanning, I think, is a really good coach, especially on offense. And yeah, this Oregon team's gonna be really good. They're really tough to play at home, kind of unlike USC. The travel sucks, but it's also really tough to play in Austin. So yeah, I think Oregon's gonna be three. I think they just fall right under these top two that are very neck and neck. But yeah, Oregon is very good going into next year. Now, in second place is, I think, by far the best offense in the country and potentially the best team in the country. It's the Ohio State Buckeyes, just 2 years removed from a national championship. Last year, they kind of bounced out early because they lost to Miami. But they, of course, were really dominant throughout the season. Almost won the Big Ten championship. Were very close to it. But they did lose to Indiana. They returned Julian Sayin, who was good last year. I think people are doubting him a little bit, but I think he brought a lot to the table, actually. And it's not that easy to play under so much pressure, even though, there are so many good receivers around him, all that stuff. I still think Sayin did a pretty good job. Now, should he have been a Heisman? Obviously not, but good player regardless. I think he's going to be great this year, potentially a Heisman this year. But he's going to be competing against his wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, who's potentially the best player in the country, probably should be the best player in the country. They also have Bo Jackson at running back. Good team. They have a good O-line as well. I think this Ohio State team is really good. Defensively, they're great as well, like they always are. And they're projected to win 10.3 games. I can see them winning more. I can see them potentially winning 10. But yeah, this Ohio State team is great. I can see them being a top three team in the country. But the reason I don't have them at number one is because I think there's one team that's just slightly better. And that team, of course, is the Indiana Hoosiers. How can I not put Curt Cignetti and the former national champions at number one? I think Ohio State beats them on talent. If we're going player for player, I think Ohio State takes them down a little bit, but Indiana just has so much to offer in terms of what they've done recently, how effectively they use the transfer portal, and I think this year it's going to be good as well. They brought in Josh Hoover from TCU, who's been great. Charlie Becker, he wasn't really their top receiver, throughout the regular season, but really turned up in the playoffs. Now he's going to be their top receiver next year. They have a good O-line as well. Carter Smith is kind of the standout there. Defensively, they have Jamari Sharp at cornerback. And yeah, this overall defensively, they're ranked number fifth. Offensively, they're number six. Like I said, talent for talent, they might not be better than Ohio State, but I really trust Cignetti over Ryan Day. And I think overall, Indiana, with what they've proven last season, I trust them to do it again. So yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. I hope I gave a good analysis for each one of the Big Ten teams. And yeah, stay tuned to the channel if you want to see more conference predictions or just college sports coverage in general.